We're not talking about one. Thank you so much, Stephen. When we're talking about God's unity, we're not talking about God as one in the category of gods. We're talking about God's unity as one and nothing else. That we're all inside of God right now. Like we explained, one of the most famous pieces of Zohar, which is God is one, but not in a sequence of numbers. In a sequence of numbers, one is a big number or a small number? Would you like to have one in your bank account or something more than that?
Something more than one.
Probably more than that, right?
I would like
One.
my bank account to be one.
The one in a sequence of numbers is the smallest number, but one in spiritual terms is the greatest number because it excludes everything else. There's one and nothing else. When we say that Hashem is echad, we mean one and nothing else. That's called a hardcore monotheism, if you know what I'm saying. That's what the Jews brought to the world. We didn't bring, there's one God. That's like softcore stuff. Hardcore monotheism is God is one. There's nothing but God. And we're in this series now where we're explaining how that's all bringing us to the midst of loving Hashem. Because you notice, right after we say Shema, what does the Torah say? Ve'ahavta. When you can get to a level of unity consciousness and just how awesome the unity of God is, it brings you a tremendous love. I want to be close to you, Hashem. The more you see how wondrous and awesome God is and how unified God is, and really knowing that I'm one with God, the more that I'm coming home to who I am, I'm coming back to God, which is my source. That is the highest level of love. And that's why Ve'ahavta comes naturally as an expression of Hashem Echad. That's where we're at. And we've been going the last about 3 weeks now, learning pieces from the Tanya. Because when you want to know about God's unity, there's one mega direction to look at, and that is the Baal Tanya. The Baal Tanya spent his entire life focusing on that element of the Torah, which was specifically God's unity. And we mentioned a number of analogies of how we understand, which is the famous, quandary, which is if God is one, why do I see all this other stuff? What do you say about that, David Shloime? If God is one, why do I see all this other stuff? Meaning one, I see a bunch of stuff around. Yeah, Itai?
It's a limitation of our finite perception.
Okay, that really is what it is. Let me ask you a question. Imagine who's the greatest sage you could think about right now. Shalom, who's the greatest sage? The greatest sage. Just that you can think of, don't worry. It won't be like, oh, he said that, not that. Ben. No, he's not a sage. He's nobody.
He's the best ever, Rabbi.
No, he's not a goat. He's not a. He missed it. I hope he does tshuva. And by him coming to Eish HaTorah, I think it's part of his tshuva. But we'll talk about that afterwards. Give me any sage. Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay. Now we're talking. Imagine Moshe Rabbeinu came to 3:30 Shir, to Baal Tanya, to Tanya Shir, 3:30, 6 constant mitzvah Shir, and Moshe Rabbeinu started telling you what he knows about the 6 constant mitzvahs. What do you think we'd all be doing? If he told you all the secrets that he knows.
It might be like the rabbi's student who fell asleep in the shiur.
So probably that, or we'd be on the ground like screaming Hashem Hu Elokim. The light would be so extreme that it would just overwhelm us. So, and let's make it even more. What would Moshe Rabbeinu do if he were to teach my 6-year-old about the mitzvah of Hashem Hu Elokim, the mitzvah of God's unity? Let's make it simple. He teaches your 3-year-old about the Hebrew letters. So, does Moshe Rabbeinu know what an aleph is all about? He knows the secrets. He knows the secrets of the aleph. By the way, the aleph is a very, very secret letter. There's a lot going on in aleph. If Moshe Rabbeinu came in and he started telling your 3-year-old children, Mitzvah Shem, you should all have big, wonderful, healthy families. So he starts telling your children about aleph and bays. And then he tells them what an aleph really is. It's a yud on the top, a yud on the bottom, a vav in the middle, yud ke, vav ke. It's the Yechudu Ilah, Yechudu Tata. It's the upper unity, the lower unity, the upper waters, the lower waters, being mashpia, it's coming down through the vav. The yin yang. He started going into the whole thing of an aleph. What do you think the 3-year-old would do?
We look at him like not understanding.
Like it does. I don't get it. But what then would Moshe Rabbeinu have to do? He would go like this. Okay, kids. Okay, here you see this is an a. There's an aleph. You see how it looks, and he pronounced it like aleph. You know, a. If you put a patach, it's an a, or there it's like an o, right? He would explain the simple. Everybody say aleph, and the kids would say aleph, and then you go like this, and he say everyone say beis, and the kids say beis, right? And then, wow, Moshe, thank you for teaching. Our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, thank you for teaching about an aleph. Now, this is very, very important that you understand this. When Moshe Rabbeinu says, everybody say aleph, aleph, does he know what he means when he says aleph? He knows exactly what an aleph is, right? But isn't Moshe Rabbeinu limiting himself when he's telling us, an aleph is, this is an aleph, and you see it looks like that, and a beis? Isn't he like less?
No, he's still what he is.
Moshe Rabbeinu is no less Moshe Rabbeinu when he hides what he knows about an aleph, and he only reveals the level of an aleph that you and I could relate to. And by doing so, he allows for a relationship to take place between the teacher and the student, and the aleph being the medium of communication, the Torah. But Moshe Rabbeinu is no less Moshe Rabbeinu. He knows what an aleph is. When Hashem creates the world, and he, so to speak, is creating the world, we said, through the Hebrew letters. And he's, so to speak, like aleph, and allowing creation to unfold. Does God become anything less by revealing, or he's the same God? God knows who he is. He's no less. Only from the perspective of a creation, now there's an ability to relate to the Creator. If you guys can appreciate this mashal, this analogy, and I hope you think about this for the next 120 years, and you'll be thinking about it also for eternity, just so you know, because eternity is where we're all going, Mitzvah Hashem, and eternity is a very, very special place, and it goes on for a very long time. So get ready for very long-term relationships. You know what I'm saying? Like, are you into a long-term relationship? Yeah, long-term relationships. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you think she wants a long-term relationship? Yeah, this is long-term relationships. Eternity. It's a very long time. So we're going to be going into eternity, and what do you think you do in eternity? Play Smash Brothers? No! Torah. Very good. Well, the only problem is when you get up to Shemayim, anything that wasn't a Torah and a mitzvah doesn't exist up there. So the person gets up there and he's like, who's playing, Smash Brothers up here? And they're like, what? It's like, no, that was my everything. So he's like trying to find it, but it doesn't exist. It's a bit lonely. And therefore, how do you have eternal meaning? Torah and mitzvahs. Torah and mitzvahs are reality. If somehow you found meaning in Smash Brothers, meaning you played with your brother and that's like your bonding time, so it became the medium to allow for bonding, then that bonding moment will carry on forever. Okay? So back to our analogy. If you can appreciate this analogy, that when God creates the world, it's like a chacham, it's like a wise man coming and not revealing everything that he knows, but him not being any less by him holding back, by him, so to speak, holding back what he knows, by him revealing what he knows, he's able to create a relationship. And the relationship in this case is the creation itself. Okay, this is another analogy of God's unity, how God doesn't change. I really want you guys to bring your Tanyas, because we're now opening up this 20th chapter of the Tanya, which is so awesome. This stuff is like as good as it gets. This stuff is good stuff. Okay? So he begins like this. We're going deeper into the topic of God's unity. V'hine mudaz zay, it's the well-known thing. L'kol. Ki mitzvahs v'azharas avodah zara. Shehem shnei dibrus harishonis. Anoichi v'lo yelecha hem klolos kol haTorah kula. We have a principle that who knows what the first two of the 10 commandments were? Anybody? Yes. Shane. So the first one is I am God. And then lo yelecha Elohim acharim al panai. And so the way Rabbi Berger says it is Anochi is I am God, and lo is, and it's not you. So the first is the reality of God's unity, and the second, the mitzvah loisase of that, is the prohibition of any even semblance of thought otherwise. Meaning his unity is so great that don't even put any hope in anything except for God. Anything as a final hope. You know, what's the first? We had a whole series on this and we talked about idol worship. And then we posted them so people can learn all about how not to do idol worship. We said it goes even so far as if a person breaks their shoelace. So what's the first thing they think about? Amazon.com. You got it. You know, right there, boom, new shoelace. So the problem is, there's a level of idol worship there, which is, why am I turning to Amazon? The first thought is, God, you're the source of shoelaces, and you created a company called Amazon that'll ship to my front door. It's correcting the first thought. Isn't that amazing? Even that first moment of, ooh, shoelace. There's only one place that shoelaces come from. You, Hashem. You want to get married? There's only one place that your shidduch comes from. Hashem. No, it comes from like the shadchan. And you'll call the shadchan, and you'll go on dates. But there's only one destination where we'll all come from. And therefore, lo yeh is do not have any other lowercase g, i.e. any other power as independent. Where you sort of think that God's reach only comes so far. The first thought is always it's from you, okay? These two mitzvahs summarize the entire Torah. Now watch this. Ki dibur anoichi, the first of the mitzvahs anoichi, kol ramach mitzvah saseh. All the 248 positive mitzvahs are inside the mitzvah of God's unity. That's all the do mitzvahs. V'lo yeh lecha kol shasa mitzvahs lo yisaseh. And the don't do includes all the, how many don't do's are there?
365.
365 corresponding to the days of the solar calendar. L'chein shamanu anachi v'lo yeh lecha levad mipi agvura. That's why we heard those two mitzvahs right from Hashem's mouth, so to speak, whatever that means. It doesn't mean his mouth, it means it was direct communication. Now, by the way, you know what happened after we heard each of them? We died. It says, Parcha nishmasam, because a person in a physical body who encounters pure spirituality, his spirituality just dislodges from the body, which is called death. And we were so connected to our source, we just popped out of our bodies. Thank God we were resurrected. Then it happened again. And we said that's enough for one day. You know, it's kind of a lot to die 2 times and be resurrected twice in a single day. And the rest then came through a, so to speak, downgraded energy of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, why did we die? So we explained. That would be like Moshe Rabbeinu, on our level, coming in and telling us everything he knows about an aleph. We would just we'd start popping out of our bodies. It would be so much.
Maybe you're seeing him even.
Yeah, we just fall over. It'd be so intense. The light would be so intense. This happens, by the way, sometimes in either it would be so intense that a person unifies with their source, or it becomes so intense that a person tries to push away the experience, which is sadly a common thing, that sometimes something becomes too real, so the person wants to divert the realness of the moment. Sometimes, I use this example because I think it's very apropos, is you could have 2 people and they've been dating for some time, And the girl says to the guy, she says, they're like watching, I don't know, the World Cup or something. And so she says like, Steve, like we've really been, going steady for a while now. So I was sort of thinking, and he's like eating nachos, like barely paying attention. Did you see that, Steve? So I was thinking like, maybe it would be time that we would tie the knot. And he's like, did she just say that? In his head, like he didn't say. Cindy? Did you say? No, we're good. Yeah. Did you see that goal? And she's like, no, Steve, like I really feel this way. And he's like, yeah, okay. I thought everything was like, we were cool and like, why do you have to get so, intense about everything? She's like, no, I really think like it's time. He's like, oh, this is good. Okay. So let's talk after the game. We'll have a real sit down about this. Now, why is Steve like avoiding this conversation?
Because he doesn't want to go where she's taking him.
Because it's getting a little bit like too much ore, too much light. I'm trying to bring Kabbalistic ideas into like real, like all the way down into like World Cup discussion and nachos. Because that's what it is, that the light is too intense for him. It's like too much. It overwhelms him. And he doesn't want to embrace that. So instead of him embracing it, he tries to either push it away. Or it gets so much that he like can't handle it. It's like, it's too exciting. Okay? That's the idea of light coming in. And a person has to be ready for it. So when God spoke to us, the light was so intense. It was so amazing that we left. We needed that light to be downgraded that we could relate to it. So in our case of Steve, was his name was Steve? Steve and Cindy. So in that example, it was like Cindy's light was too intense and he was like trying to divert it and not be able to relate to it. And say like, can you downgrade that to like, maybe we'll just like keep hanging out and eating nachos? Like that's kind of the relationship I can handle. So he's got to either learn to build vessels to receive that level of light, or she has to learn maybe to be careful about not giving too much light before Steve is ready. But that's all relationships, is a lot of light and then the vessels to be able to receive it. So back to us, is that God came, there was a big, big light. Okay? Fine. Now he's going to explain what this all means. This is good. Got to bring your Tanyas. Lever heitiv inyan zeh tzarich lahazker tchila b'ktsara. In order for me to really explain to you how these two mitzvahs, Anochi and Lo Yeh Lecha, are, in essence, they sum up the whole Torah, I need to first explain, he's going to go now on an entire investigation of God's unity and use a wondrous analogy that's going to take us for 2 chapters. We've previously seen a number of wondrous analogies about the sun and the rays, which we spent some time on. We're now going to see another analogy, which is so moving that we're going to have to sit with this. Okay, so let's begin it today. We call Hashem Yachid Umeyuchad. God is one, and He's unique. His oneness is like none other. V'kol mamin shula vadai, hu kamoy shahaya koidim shenivra olam mamish. God's unity is also the same now, it's important, as it was before creation. Meaning I might have said that God is one before creation. But then, post-creation, well, God can't be one, right? Because look, there's God plus creation, right? Isn't that the math? Well, let's do the math. If God is infinite, infinite plus anything equals? Infinite. You guessed it, that's right. You can't plus onto infinite. But we seem to see a world, don't we? So how are we going to understand that? That God's unity is the same God before the creation as it is after the creation. Okay, this is going to be an investigation. It's going to take us a few days to go into this topic. It's the same God pre-creation to post-creation. Nothing changed in God. I want you to also use the analogy that we just gave of the great sage, that when he says something and he explains something, even though he downgrades what he knows about it, nothing changes in him. Okay, use that also as another starting point to appreciate how even after the sage says something, downgraded, nothing was changed in him from before he said it, okay? Use that as a bit of a starting point. Any questions so far? I know we're kind of diving down. Everyone have your snorkel gear on? Mm-hmm. No, it's deeper than snorkel. Scuba diving gear? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go. By the way, this is the stuff they were learning in like the caves in Tzfat. Like this is the good stuff. This is the stuff we've been learning for all the generations, like by candlelight, in secret groups of really learning about God's unity, learning about the world, the truth of existence. And the truth is, our mission is to bring this light to all of humanity, to bring God awareness to all of humanity. That's the job of the Jewish people, to bring God consciousness to all of humanity and God's unity to all of humanity. So let's go in a little bit deeper. And we speak about this also in our davening. Where do we speak about this very, very clearly? Kamay shekasav. Atahu ad shaloi nivra olam. God, you are one before the world was created. Atahu misha nivra olam. And you're one also after the world was created. We say that in our davening. You're one from before creation, you're one after creation. Your oneness spans everything. Perish hu mamish b'li shum shinui. Without any change in you whatsoever. You have not changed. Can the infinity change? That would imply that there's no infinity. And we already know, we've discussed many times before, that the infinity is a mathematical truth and a logical truth of reality, because finite existence cannot start itself. Shmuli, you're born to a mother? It's not a trick question. Yeah, and she came from a mother? Came from a mother, right? All the way back? And until when? Maybe you'll say there was always mothers. Till the Aleph. Until Chevra, right? So at a certain point, so maybe you'll suggest, no, there was always mothers that just go back for eternity. Why is that a contradiction?
Because you can't have a finite process go on to infinity.
That's right. The very fact that something is a finite sequence means that I could point to something on a sequential line that precludes it being infinite, because infinite has no points. And also, at what point did this begin? You can't say it always existed, because the fact that there's a timeline, besides that you could point to a mother, the fact that there's mothers existing on a timeline, I could point to that point in time, which precludes infinity also. Therefore, at a certain point, there was a first mother, and then what was before that? The question's always going to come, so who done it? How did it happen? And the answer is, it's something outside the finite existence, which is infinity. So infinity is a logical reality, it's a logical truth. It's just following a logical sequence, which most of the world doesn't use their brain to think this way. This is Aristotelian thought, is using your brain to think and understand there's a first cause. That's Pashut. So God is infinity, but also after creation is infinity. So the question is, so where does all this come in? Okay, that's going to be a question. If God's infinity, so what's all this stuff? We're going to have to answer that. I'm looking forward to answering that with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mehera. Amen. Kol Tov, have a wonderful day. Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
To be continued tomorrow. We're going to pop into the analogy. Shalom.